We're going to talk about building grateful lives, or grateful building. And I know we've all had kids we've known people that you think you've done something really great, and it complains. And we're going to show a clip from Tim Hawkins. He's a comedian, and he has a great sense of humor. I hope. There he is.
I took my kids a while back to this theme park called Six Flags. You ever heard of Six Flags? It's a real fun theme park, man. Took them there for a day. I spent $500,000. $500,000 in a day. We're driving home that night. I heard this in the back seat. Hey, sweetheart, what's wrong? Billy's daddy took them to Disney World. For a week. And we just got to go to Six Flags for a day. We hate you. Sweetheart, look up here at Daddy. Jesus, take the wheel. You ever feel like doing that? I have. Like, we got insurance. Let's see what happens. I don't care anymore. I just don't want to hear that. How ungrateful is that? Disney World. Let's make a new theme park for kids. We'll call it Third World. Send them there for a few weeks. See if they don't come back a little more grateful. You know what I'm talking about? It's the third world after all. It's... Daddy, I want a Happy Meal. He'll be happy to get a meal. Daddy, Mickey Mouse. No, that's a giant rat. Get out of here! It's the third... Oh, it's a poison dart. I just got that.
We've probably all been there and heard that. The sad part is that some of the young people that have continued to become ungrateful adults as well, and you've probably met some of them as well. How can we build gratefulness into our lives, in the lives of our children? How can we be grateful building people? Just like building a tower of any kind, you need a strong foundation. And you need building blocks to get those done. And we're going to be talking about a bunch of building blocks that I've got piled here and how we can build gratitude into our lives. So the dictionary's definition of gratitude is being appreciative of benefits received, expressing gratitude or grateful thanks, affording pleasure or contentment, pleasing by reason of comfort supplied or discomfort alleviated. So as we think of our own lives, many of us are grateful for what we have and where we are and what's happening in our lives. But there are times we tend to complain, isn't there? There are times where it comes out, even if we really don't mean to. We're not always grateful for everything that happens in our lives. Daniel was a young man when he was captured by King Nebuchadnezzar and brought to Babylon. And as we follow his life as a captive in Babylon, we discover that he was a person that was grateful and thankful despite his circumstances. So we're going to look at the book of Daniel. We're going to start in chapter 1, verses 1 to 7. And if you are at home, Daniel's there after Ezekiel, and he's beginning of the prophets in the Old Testament. Those of you here, it'll be up on the screen for most of the time. But if you want a Bible and you don't have one, there's a few in the back there if you want to follow along with something in your hands. But it says, during the reign of King Jehoiakim's reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim of Judah and permitted him to take some of the sacred objects from the temple of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia and placed them in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. And the king said, select only strong, healthy, and good-looking young men, he said. Make sure they are well-versed in every branch of learning, are gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. The king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. They were to be trained for 3 years. Then they would enter the royal service. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were 4 of the young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah. The chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belshazzar, Hananiah was called Shadrach, Mishael was called Meshach, and Azariah was called Abednego. Now King Nebuchadnezzar had invaded Jerusalem and looted the temple of God, and he captured some of the people. This is the first time he went in. He went in more than once to Jerusalem. And from these people were the young men and women of Israel, the future of Israel. These were the top, the kids that were in school. They were the smart ones. They were the ones that had benefits. And so that's what the king wanted. He wanted those men, those young men. He said, select only strong, healthy, and good-looking young men. Make sure they're well-versed in every branch of learning. They're gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and that they can serve in my palace. Train these guys, these young men, in the language and literature of Babylon. They're going to be indoctrinated. Daniel was probably only a teenager when he arrived in Babylon, maybe 17 years old, 16, 17. Yet he was intelligent, he was healthy, and he was good looking. And he stood out from the crowd that was brought in. And as a young man, as he was singled out, he was going to be pulled to live into the palace with some of the other young men from Jerusalem, including 3 of his friends. Nebuchadnezzar's plan was to indoctrinate these young people, including all of them, and so that they could have domination over the whole area. I mean, basically, if you can indoctrinate the young people, then they become your allies with the people from the other cultures. And so Nebuchadnezzar was a smart ruler. He knew what he was doing. He wanted to supply himself with the best minds and the new perspectives from all the cultures in the other lands. So in one swoop, he added these war trophies to his own government, his own people. And then he had these minds that he could just learn from, and he could cultivate and help them to rule their own people. He was shrewd. He wanted to understand the culture and understand, if you treat captives well, they in turn will treat you well, and they will help to keep the people of Judah in line. Because most of the people, ended up living in refugee camps if they didn't fit this bunch, or, they were or slaves to the Babylonians. So we see Daniel and his 3 friends chosen to be a part of the Babylonian class. So then they excelled in them. They didn't waste their time, or they didn't fight the system. They didn't complain and whine. They did what they needed to do for 3 years. They learned everything they could from the Babylonians. And these 4 men, especially Daniel, were singled out to be leaders. And they end up being wise men in Babylon. So if you go to chapter 2 of Daniel, I didn't put that up on the screen, so I'm just going to kind of give you a summary. But King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. And he had this dream, and he didn't tell anybody what it was, but he wanted them to tell him what the dream was and what it meant. So he told the astrologers and all these guys that he already had Babylonian wise people, and he said, tell me what my dream meant. And they said, well, tell us the dream, and we'll tell you what it means. And Nebuchadnezzar said, no, if you're as smart as you are, you tell me what my dream was, and then you tell me what it means. Which seems pretty, they said, that can't be done. That's not fair. We can't do that. And Nebuchadnezzar was mad. I mean, he told everybody that. And it says, the king's demand is impossible, they said. No one except God can tell you your dream. And the king was furious when they heard this, and he ordered all the wise men of Babylon to be killed. So he said, okay, let's kill them all. We'll start over. And that included Daniel and his three friends. They had no idea what was going on. They hadn't even been asked yet. So the leader, Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, came to kill Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And Daniel goes, why? What are you going to kill us for? And he told them what was going on. He said, okay, let me go talk to the king. So Daniel went and talked to King Nebuchadnezzar. He says, give us another day. Because he said, we didn't even hear about this yet. Let us pray to our God, and if he will answer us and tell us what it was. So Daniel went back to his friends. The king granted him that extra day. And he went back to his friends, and he said, you guys, we need to pray. We need to pray and fast tonight that God will tell us what that dream was and what it means. So that's what they did. They spent the night in prayer. And in the morning, or during that time, Daniel came out and he said, that night the secret was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven. He said, "Praise the name of God forever and ever, for he has all wisdom and power. He controls the course of world events. He removes kings and he sets up other kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the scholars. He reveals deep and mysterious things and knows what lies hidden in darkness, though he is surrounded by light. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors, for you have given me wisdom and strength. You have told me what we asked of you and revealed to us what the king demanded." So these 4 men were saved because Daniel was told what the dream was and what it meant, and he went to King Nebuchadnezzar and he explained it to him. We see that David's first response was to praise God and to thank him for the answer. He didn't forget who was helping him out. He didn't forget God during that. So, and we see this continually through Daniel's life. So as we consider the life of Daniel, we recognize a man that had a strong foundation of faith, and he had a strong foundation of gratitude. He knew whom to pray to, and he recognized the need to be grateful for the answer. As adults and as parents and as teachers, we can be people that are grateful builders, laying bricks of faithfulness, blocks of faithfulness and thankfulness in our lives and the lives of others around us. Daniel had a great foundation, obviously. He understood the times, he knew what was going on, he had a great foundation of faith, and he practiced it all through the Babylonian time that he was there. He was there for 70 years. So he was there a long time. And we can be men and women that build gratefulness into our lives and the lives of others. So I want to offer 5 building blocks this morning that will get us closer to becoming men and women that practice gratitude and thanksgiving all year long, not just in the month of November. So first, we should cultivate gratitude and fortitude. So we have fortitude, I did it backwards, and gratitude. So we're going to put them as our foundation, our base for our building this morning. So they're going to be there to be built. And so in Colossians 3:15 and 16 says, "Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds all together in perfect harmony, and let the peace that comes from Christ rule in your hearts. For as members of one body, you are called to live in peace, and always be thankful. Let the message about Christ and all its richness fill your lives. Teach and counsel each other with all wisdom he gives. Sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs to God with thankful hearts." Gratitude depends on 2 virtues. A positive attitude, seeing the good in things around you. We won't feel thankful unless we have that mindset to begin with. I mean, if we're always looking for the negative, what'll happen? You find it, don't you? I mean, you've seen those people. Every time you talk to them, they can find something wrong. No matter how good it is, there's always something wrong. And sometimes maybe we're even like that. If we've had a really bad week, it just seems like one more thing. And everything goes downhill. We have to look, and we have to be open to seeing the good. And then those things will be more apparent to us. We'll have that positive attitude. Fortitude, that's that inner toughness, enables us to endure pain and suffering during those times of disappointment and heartache. Many people think life should be easy, especially if you're a Christian. Sometimes we believe that, when we become a Christian, Jesus makes everything easy. Like Tim Hawkins said, Jesus takes the wheel. He just does it all for you and everything is perfect. Doesn't work that way. In fact, Jesus himself said it wouldn't work that way. He said in John 17, he goes, he's talking to God about believers, and he said, "God, I have given them your word, and the world hates them because they do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. I'm not asking you to take them out of the world, but to keep them safe from the evil one. They don't belong to this world any more than I do." He knew we were going to have trouble. He's promised it, basically. He said, "You will have trials, you will have problems because you follow me." So because we follow Jesus, we know we're going to have trouble. But we need to have that fortitude, that perseverance that knows that God is still in control through it all, and that he loves us, he's got a plan for this, and that he'll help us through it. To be ready to build a grateful life, we begin with these blocks, gratitude and fortitude. You've got to have those at your beginning. The next block involves counting your blessings. We need to count our blessings. Galatians 6:9 says, "So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up." To truly learn to be happy, we need to count our blessings. One way to practice that is to do it as a family, or to do it around the supper table or dinner table, whichever one you do in the evening with everybody around. And you just sit there and think of all the, just look at your meal. Think about all the people that were involved in getting that meal on the table. It wasn't just the person that cooked it or the box that it came out of. It's the farmers that harvested the grain, or grew the cows, or raised the cattle, or had the milk. All that kind of stuff comes from someplace else, and we can be thankful for the farmers, for the people that package it, and the grocery store that sells it, the clerk at the counter, the parent or the person that cooked it, and the person that's at the table. I mean, there's so many people that go into just a meal. And you can just start there. And it's easy. You start naming all the things that you could be thankful for, and you can start seeing more and more. The truck drivers that got it to the store. Think of all the behind-the-scenes people that make our life easier and better, like the garbage collector, or the mail person, or the janitor. As we make a list, we discover many things that we can be thankful for. Next, we can learn to appreciate our family and our friends, those people in our lives that make our life better. Even before he made the world, God loved us, and he chose us in Christ to be holy and without fault in his eyes. God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great pleasure. So we praise God for the glorious grace he has poured on us who belong to his dear Son. We are part of the family of God. We are part of a Christian family. We're part of a church family. And then we have our own family and friends. We can learn to appreciate them. So many people go through their lives without ever hearing thank you, or being told that they're appreciated. And even, so kids, like that stationery we were talking about, write some thank you notes, or at least be mindful enough to tell somebody thank you on a regular basis. Because the more you say thankful, that you tell somebody else thank you, the more you realize what you're thankful for as well. Because they don't have to do a lot of that stuff. Take the no complaints challenge. That's our last building block, and that's a huge one. No more complaining. Just stick up a no whine zone in your head and say, nope, do everything without complaining and arguing so that no one can criticize you. That's in Philippians 2:14 and 15. And the gentleman that wrote that was in prison at the time. He said, no complaining and arguing, so no one can criticize you. He's talking to believers. He's wrote them a letter. As a family, commit to going 24 hours without complaining. Ask your kids to predict when that's going to happen first, or your friend. Have somebody to hold you accountable, and then ask them, how did I do? Did I make it? One of our kids was struggling with arguing, complaining as a 15-year-old, and he wanted to be homeschooled. And I said, well, only if you can go a month without arguing with me. He never got homeschooled, but it's hard. It's hard, isn't it? When we think about some of the things we complain about and argue. Some people like to argue. I grew up that way. Me and my brother, we argued every morning. We argued about the weather. We just argued. And I don't even know what we argued about now, but that was how we communicated in our house. And we still kind of do it, just not as much. And unfortunately, I probably passed that gene on to some of my kids. And they're all nodding over here. That's a little scary. But I know that because that's how we communicated in our house. It was arguing. And we had a loud house, and we still have a loud house. And but do you really need to complain to make yourself feel better? What other ways can you deal with stress or disappointment? What are some better ways? Think about those things instead of complaining and arguing. What are some better ways to express yourselves? Daniel had a good foundation of faith, and he is found regularly giving thanks to God despite his circumstances. When Daniel and his friends, they were told they were going to die because no one could interpret the king's dream, Daniel went to the king and asked for an extra day. He didn't shrivel up, he didn't complain and argue, he didn't protest. He just went to the king and asked for another day. Then he and his friends prayed and fasted to God that night and sought an answer. And God gave him an answer. And Daniel's first response was, I thank you, God. I praise you, the God of my ancestors, for you have given me wisdom and strength. God answered his prayer, and he said thank you. Daniel continued that attitude of gratitude throughout his life. Daniel was in Babylon throughout the entire captivity of the people of Israel. He got there, like I said, as a teenager, and he remained there through 2 more kings. Even when King Darius of the Medes conquered Babylon, Daniel remained faithful and strong in his leadership there because he continued to build gratefulness in his life. In chapter 6, we see Daniel again. Very familiar story for many of you. It's the precursor to the lion's den. And we're going to follow along from Daniel chapter 6, verses 1 through about verse 10, I think, verse 8. So Darius the Mede decided to divide the kingdom into 120 provinces, and he appointed a high officer to rule over each province. The king also chose Daniel and 2 others as administrators to supervise the high officers and protect the king's interests. Daniel soon proved himself more capable than all the other administrators and high officers. Because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. Then the other administrators and high officers began looking for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs, but they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. So they concluded our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel will be in connection with the rules of his religion. So the administrators and high officers went to the king and said, "Long live King Darius. We are all in agreement, we administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors, that the king should make a law that will be strictly enforced. Give orders that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of lions. And now, your majesty, issue this law so it cannot be changed, an official law of the Medes and Persians that cannot be revoked." So King Darius signed the law. But when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home, knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with his windows open toward Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. Daniel exhibited a life of integrity, of gratefulness. He was a man of faith, great faith. And when he heard about the law King Darius had signed, he went home and did what he always did. He wasn't intimidated. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he always had done, giving thanks to God. Now, he could have complained to God, he could have hidden from God, and he could have thought, this isn't fair, they're going to kill me, I'm going to get thrown into some lions. But he stayed true, and he stayed thankful. And we don't hear of any time that he's ever complained during all of this thing. And it's just amazing. He went home and he prayed and gave thanks to God. And this wasn't something new. It's something that he always did. He did it every day, 3 times a day. Daniel built gratefulness into his life to God. Daniel had a lot of things to complain about. Even though he was a good man, he was captured as a teenager. Then he was picked out to go through an indoctrination course to prepare him to be a Babylonian, to lose his own ancestry, his own background. The plan would make him a leader over the Babylonians and over his own people. So he would be looked at possibly as a traitor, as somebody that, was, I was trying to think of a good word for it. Somebody brown-nosing the Babylonians. He would be looked at like somebody that was on the wrong side. But he did, and he continued to be the man that he could have complained about the food that was first given, but instead he asked for a different menu. When King Nebuchadnezzar had his dream, Daniel could complain it was impossible. Can't do this. It's too hard. And just gave up or got upset. He could have complained about how difficult and unfair it was, but instead he told his friends that they needed to pray. All through his life, despite the challenges and the struggles, we never hear him complain. We see a man that is faithful and grateful and has fortitude. He had grateful building as a foundation in his life. And I want to give you some ideas to help you to be grateful in your lives as well. Here's if you want to say, a menu of tactics to get you started. First, wake up every day and express to God something you're grateful for. And some of us, it might be just thankful that we can wake up. As we get older, we're thankful that we have a morning to wake up too. Second, tell a loved one, somebody you live with and see every day, before you go to bed, 3 things you're most grateful about of them. Number 3, tell your closest friend or your spouse or a family member 3 things that you're most grateful for in that moment. Somebody that you're hanging around with today or tomorrow or in your family, especially those of you that don't live with somebody. I mean, find somebody in your life that you're close to. And just 3 things that you're grateful about. Start a gratitude journal. Now, it's not a terrible thing. I know it's hard for a lot of us to write and put things down. But, just put a tablet out there and start writing things that you're thankful. Every night, write some stuff that you're grateful for, or you're proud of, or you're excited about that happened to you during the day. Acknowledge what God is doing in and through you. Those things that you've accomplished or been a part of for the last day or the last week or the whole last year. Just start thinking, and instead of comparing yourself to others, give yourself credit for the big and small things that have happened in your life that you've been a part of, that you've been doing. Sometimes the person that we're most hard on is our own selves. We need to think of all the things that we've come through and that God has done in our lives. And just write those down, or just at least think about them, acknowledge them. Acknowledge the people that God has brought across your path. And thank them for the inspiration or for helping you or supporting you. Oftentimes, people wait their whole lives to be acknowledged. And yet it's so infrequent that we remember to tell them thank you. Just say thank you. Every day won't be perfect. In fact, you can count on it, because we live in an imperfect world with imperfect people. So if you have a perfect day, that's a wonder. You're exceptional, because it just doesn't happen. In fact, you can count on each day not being perfect. Instead, when we focus on what we're grateful for and the people that we are grateful for, it tends to wash away our anger and our negativity. Building a foundation of gratitude will improve not only your attitude, but in recent studies shows that feeling and expressing gratitude leads to better physical health as well. Paul Mills, a professor of family medicine and public health at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, conducted studies that looked at the role of gratitude on heart health. Among other things, he found that participants who kept a journal most days of the week, writing 2 or 3 things they were grateful for, everything from appreciating their children to their travel or to good food, had reduced levels of inflammation and improved heart rhythm compared to people who didn't write in a journal. And the journal keepers also showed a decreased risk of heart disease after only 2 months of doing it. Makes a difference right away. Try adopting some of those above tactics, those things that we just mentioned. Even just 1 or 2 will help to develop a grateful mindset. Be like Daniel. Build grateful into your life. With Thanksgiving just a few weeks away, I want to remind you to cultivate gratitude and fortitude in your life. Start cultivating those things in your life. Count your blessings. Start a journal of thanks. Appreciate the people in your life. Appreciate your family and your friends. Tell them you appreciate them. You never know. Connor one time went to visit great-grandma, and he goes, my parents said I should remember I never know when she's going to be here the next time. And so he's always made sure when he went and helped me with chores, he'd go in and tell grandma, hello, or great-grandma for him. And so I thought, that's something we all need to remember. We never know how long we have somebody with us. Lastly, stop complaining. So as we're going to pray now, and we're going to actually go into communion. We're going to be and just remember with Thanksgiving all that Jesus has done for us, as he has given us his life